It started on a quiet, dark night in late October, one of those nights where the air felt thin and the trees seemed to whisper something just out of earshot. I'm Alex Carter, and I've been a police officer in a small town in Alaska for the past 5 years. That night, I was working the midnight shift alone at the station. It was one of those slow, uneventful nights where nothing was happening. I remember sitting at my desk, the only sound being the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, and the occasional tapping of my pen against the paperwork. Suddenly, the phone rang, piercing through the stillness. It wasn't the usual call, it was a distress call from a local truck driver, a guy named Doug who had been driving through the back roads of the region. He was trembling on the other side of the line, his voice barely audible. "Officer Carter, you need to get to the old highway. It's not just animals, it's something else. Something that shouldn't be out here." I'd heard some wild stories about these roads. Alaska's vast wilderness can play tricks on the mind, but Doug's voice was full of panic. I immediately grabbed my keys and headed for the patrol car. As I drove out of town, the fog rolled in thick, swallowing the headlights. The quiet was suffocating, almost unnatural. I told myself it was just a prank. That's what I wanted to believe anyway. But the further I drove, the more the hairs on my neck stood up. Something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The road ahead stretched into the fog like a never-ending tunnel, the blackness swallowing everything beyond the glow of my headlights. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting someone or something to be following me. It wasn't the first time I'd driven these back roads late at night, but tonight felt different, heavier, almost suffocating. About 20 miles outside of town, I saw it. Doug's truck, parked by the side of the road. Its lights were off, and the engine was cold. He wasn't in the driver's seat. I pulled over and stepped out of my patrol car, the air crisp and cold against my skin. The only sound was the faint rustle of leaves, but it wasn't a comforting sound, it felt like something was watching. I called out to Doug. "Doug? You there?" No answer. Just the silence of the wilderness. I started walking toward the truck, my flashlight cutting through the thick fog. That's when I saw the first sign that something was wrong. The ground around the truck was trampled, like something had been pacing back and forth. There were no tire marks leading to where the truck was parked. It was as though the vehicle had been dropped here from nowhere. I reached the driver's side door and pulled it open. The seat was empty. But that wasn't the worst part. Laying on the floor of the truck was a crumpled, blood-stained jacket, Doug's jacket. It was torn to shreds as if something had ripped it apart. But there was no sign of him. Just the jacket. And that feeling, the one that had been nagging me for miles, grew stronger. Something was out there, and it wasn't human. I radioed in for backup, but there was no response. Not even static. It was just me. Alone. In the dark. The air felt colder now, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. I stood by Doug's truck, staring at the torn jacket, trying to make sense of it. I knew something wasn't right, but the officer in me was trying to stay calm. My hand hovered over my gun, instinctively, but I didn't want to escalate things unless I had to. Then I heard it, a noise that didn't belong. A deep, guttural sound, like something dragging its body through the underbrush. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound wasn't just coming from one direction, it was all around me, echoing through the fog. My breath caught in my throat. "Doug?" I called out again, my voice trembling despite myself. No response. I quickly scanned the area, trying to make out shapes in the thick fog. That's when I saw it. A figure, barely visible, moving slowly between the trees. It was tall, too tall, and it seemed to bend in unnatural ways, like it was more shadow than substance. I couldn't make out its features, but the shape was wrong, like it wasn't meant to be seen by human eyes. My training kicked in, but my legs felt like lead. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound, but the figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. Then, the sound came again, closer this time, and louder, like something was crawling on all fours. I turned around to find the source of the noise, but I didn't have time to process it. It was on me. Something heavy and slick slammed into my side, knocking me to the ground. I hit the dirt hard, the breath knocked out of me. A cold, wet smell flooded my senses. I scrambled to my feet, my flashlight swinging wildly, casting brief flashes of shapes in the fog. I saw eyes, more than one pair, glowing faintly in the darkness, just above the ground. Panic surged through me. Whatever these things were, they were closing in, and they weren't friendly. I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, but the fog seemed to shift with me. Every time I thought I was running toward my car, the trees and shadows twisted, making it harder to find my way back. I could feel them, the eyes, following me, and I dared not look back. I was lost, and worse, so was Doug. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I ran, stumbling through the thick fog, every step feeling heavier than the last. I cursed myself for not carrying better equipment, no infrared, no backup. All I had was my flashlight and a gun I wasn't sure I'd ever have the courage to use. The trees around me blurred together, shifting as if they were alive, pushing me off course. I wasn't just lost. I was being hunted. I could still hear them, those dragging, wet sounds, getting closer. There were more of them, now, more than I could count. The sickening smell of rot filled my nostrils, making me gag, but I couldn't stop. I wasn't sure what I was running from, but I knew one thing, it wasn't human. The fog seemed to close in tighter, suffocating me. I didn't know which direction I was going anymore. The air was thick with a sense of inevitability, as if whatever these things were, they knew exactly where I was, and they were letting me run only because they wanted to savor it. I could feel their presence closing in from all sides. They were toying with me. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet changed. I was no longer running through the soft dirt but through something harder, smoother. Concrete. My patrol car. I'd somehow ended up on the side of the highway again, and I could see the faint outline of it through the fog. I pushed myself harder, almost at a crawl, desperate to reach it. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the car door, and I yanked it open. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking as I fumbled to start the engine. Just as the engine roared to life, I heard it, a deafening screech from behind me. I whipped my head around, but there was nothing there. The figure that had been following me, whatever it was gone, swallowed by the fog. But the sound lingered, a low, horrifying growl that rattled my bones. I didn't wait. I slammed the gearshift into drive and peeled out onto the road, the tires kicking up gravel behind me. As I sped away, the fog seemed to part just enough for me to see the road ahead, and I dared to glance at the rearview mirror. That was my mistake. In the mirror, I saw them. Figures. Their eyes glowing, mouths open, their limbs twisted and wrong. They were standing on the road, watching me, waiting for me to come back. But I wasn't going to stop. I couldn't. As I looked ahead, the road seemed to stretch on forever. But in my gut, I knew I wasn't out of the woods yet. Not by a long shot. I kept my foot pressed down on the gas, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, but the further I drove, the more the hairs on my neck prickled. It was as if the world around me had become a twisted version of itself. The trees seemed to bend unnaturally, reaching out toward the road as if trying to pull me back into the fog. The weight in the air felt thicker, almost oppressive, like something was pushing down on me. I didn't dare glance at the rearview mirror again, but I could still feel those eyes, those cold, predatory eyes, watching me. I knew I wasn't just dealing with some wild animals. No animal could move like that, no animal could make the noises I had heard. What I had encountered out there, what was still out there, wasn't from this world. And worse, it seemed to know me. It knew my every move, my every breath. I kept my eyes focused straight ahead, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling out of control. But every turn I took, every stretch of road, it felt like I was being led somewhere. Somewhere I didn't want to go. Just as I approached a sharp bend, I saw something up ahead, a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt, and the car lurched to a stop just inches from the person. It was Doug. His face was pale, his eyes wide and bloodshot, but what struck me the most was the way he stood. He wasn't moving. He wasn't reacting at all, as if he wasn't even aware I was there. "Doug?" I called out, but there was no response. He just stood there, staring at nothing. The fog rolled around him like it was alive, curling around his legs. I hesitated. Every instinct in me screamed to drive past him, to get the hell out of there. But Doug had been the one to call me. He had been in trouble, and now he was here, alive, but something was wrong. I got out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest. "Doug, what the hell happened to you?" His head jerked slightly, but it wasn't a natural movement. His eyes flicked to mine, but there was something empty behind them, no recognition, no warmth, just coldness. A deep, unnatural coldness. Then, without warning, he lurched forward, his hands snapping out like claws, grabbing me by the shoulders. I stumbled back in shock, my breath catching in my throat. "Help me," he whispered, but the voice wasn't his. It was distorted, guttural, like it was coming from something else entirely. The grip on my shoulders tightened, and a chill swept over me, one that had nothing to do with the cold. I tried to push him off, but it was like trying to move a wall. "Doug! Snap out of it!" That's when I noticed it, his skin was changing, shifting. The color was wrong, turning an unnatural shade of pale gray, as if it was decaying in front of me. The eyes, they weren't his anymore. They were glowing, that same sickly glow I'd seen in the things in the fog. And then, just as quickly as he had grabbed me, Doug let go and fell to the ground. He collapsed, twitching, his body writhing as though he were fighting something inside. The same guttural voice filled the air again, louder this time, as if whatever was controlling him was trying to escape. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest, fear flooding every part of me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shape. Moving through the fog behind Doug's body. It wasn't human. I stood frozen, my breath coming in sharp gasps as the figure in the fog slowly took shape. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and as it moved closer, the air grew colder, thicker. Every step it took felt like a thunderclap in the silence, each footfall echoing through the empty road, sending a chill straight down my spine. Its limbs were twisted, bent at unnatural angles, and its skin, if it could even be called skin, was a mottled gray, stretched thin and cracked. It had no face, no recognizable features, just a dark, hollow space where its head should have been. But even from a distance, I could feel its eyes, something dark and ancient, something that saw right through me, as if I were nothing more than a fleeting thought. Doug's body lay motionless on the ground, his form contorting in spasms, but he wasn't the threat anymore. The thing in front of me was. My hand instinctively went to my gun, but I knew I wasn't prepared for whatever this was. The last few months of training didn't cover creatures like this. It wasn't human. It wasn't even animal. It was something ancient, something that shouldn't exist in this world. I backed away slowly, every part of me screaming to run, but my legs felt like they were made of stone, rooted to the spot. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows, but it did nothing to pierce the suffocating darkness that surrounded us. The thing took another step forward, its movements jerky, like it was caught between worlds. The fog seemed to swirl around it, as if it was drawing power from it. A low, inhuman growl escaped the hollow space where its mouth should have been, and I felt my heart skip a beat. It was coming for me. I had no choice. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the asphalt, the sound of the creature's footsteps growing louder behind me. I didn't look back, I couldn't. If I did, I knew I wouldn't survive. I reached the car, and with shaking hands, I wrenched open the door and jumped inside. I slammed it shut, the car rattling as I fumbled to start the engine. The creature was close now, too close. I could hear its breath, wet and ragged, just outside my window. I forced the car into gear and sped down the road, praying that whatever it was couldn't keep up. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw it. The creature was standing in the middle of the road, watching me, its dark form a silhouette against the fog. And as I drove away, I saw something even more horrifying, Doug's body, still writhing, still twitching on the ground, but now it was changing. His limbs were bending and twisting in impossible ways, his face contorting as if trying to scream, but no sound came from his throat. I couldn't go back. I didn't know if Doug was even alive anymore. I floored the gas pedal, the road blurring in front of me, my mind racing. What had I just witnessed? What had happened to Doug? And what the hell was that thing? I didn't stop until I was back in town, and by then, the fog had lifted, leaving nothing behind but the memory of something ancient, something that shouldn't have been there. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The memories, the images, the feeling of being hunted, were burned into my mind. I tried to convince myself it had been some sort of hallucination, the stress, the isolation, playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. What I had seen, what I had felt, those were real. The next day, I tried to go back to the station, tried to act normal, but nothing was the same. The town felt off. The air was heavier, the streets quieter. People avoided me. It was as if they knew. Or maybe they had always known. I made a decision, I couldn't just leave it alone. I couldn't live with myself knowing I hadn't done everything I could to figure out what happened to Doug, what happened on that road. I had to go back to the old highway. I had to know if it was still out there. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't trust anyone. Not anymore. I drove out alone, retracing my steps, the road still hauntingly familiar. The fog had returned, thicker than ever. But this time, I wasn't just going to run. This time, I was going to confront whatever that thing was, whatever it had done to Doug, and to me. As I approached the spot where it all happened, I felt that same pressure, that same sense of being watched. The trees seemed to lean in, the shadows closing around me. And there, just ahead on the road, I saw it. Doug's truck. But it wasn't just the truck. There were others. Figures, standing in the fog, their shapes twisting in the same unnatural ways, just like Doug had been. They were waiting. Watching. I stopped the car, my heart in my throat, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I got out of the car, my gun at the ready, though I knew it wouldn't do any good. The thing in the fog wasn't something I could shoot. It wasn't something that could be stopped by normal means. The figures, if they could even be called that, moved toward me, their bodies jerking in unnatural rhythms. Doug was among them, his face still twisted, but there was something different now. His eyes locked onto mine. They were hollow. Lifeless. But there was a hint of recognition. "Alex," he rasped, the voice not fully his, but there was a desperation in it. "It's too late." Before I could respond, I heard it again, the growl. It came from behind me, deeper, darker than before. And then, I saw it. The creature. The one that had chased me, the one that had turned Doug into one of them. It was emerging from the fog, its towering form towering over the others, its limbs stretching unnaturally. This was it. It had come for me. But this time, I wasn't running. I took a deep breath and aimed my gun at the creature, steadying my hand. I knew there was no chance of survival, but I couldn't just give up. Not like this. Not without a fight. And then, just as I was about to pull the trigger, something incredible happened. The creature froze. Its head tilted, and for the first time, I felt its attention focus on something else. Behind me. I turned slowly, and in the distance, there was a light. A car's headlights. I recognized the vehicle immediately. It was another officer from the station, a man named Greg, who had been one of my partners on the force. He must have come looking for me, knowing I wouldn't have gone alone. The creature let out a deafening screech, and in that moment, I knew. It wasn't just after me. It had been after anyone who came too close to this place. It was feeding off the fear, the isolation, the darkness. But now, there was light. There was someone else. The creature hesitated for a split second, as if it couldn't comprehend what was happening. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it turned and disappeared into the fog, vanishing like smoke. Greg pulled up beside me, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. He didn't ask questions, he didn't need to. He knew. And as I got into the car with him, the fog seemed to part just enough for us to see the road ahead, but the memory of what had happened would haunt me forever. The things in the fog were still out there. Waiting. But I had survived. I was one of the lucky ones. For now.